The Late Set is supported by WRTI members and the Cape May Jazz Festival Foundation, presenting the 25th edition of the Exit Zero Jazz Festival, November 7th through 9th. This is your chance to see the iconic vocalist Cassandra Wilson presenting the 30th anniversary of her album, New Moon Daughter. Also appearing, bass virtuoso Stanley Clark and Roy Hargrove's Crisol, an all-star band led by Roy's longtime collaborators. Those artists and so many more at the Exit Zero Jazz Festival in Cape May, New Jersey, this November 7th through 9th. Learn more at exitzerojazzfestival.com. Now, here's the Late Set.
Welcome to the Late Set from WRTI. I'm Josh Jackson.
I'm Nate Zenón.
We just heard some music from an upcoming recording by saxophonist Miguel Zenón and his quartet. It's called Vanguardia Subterránea. And
love that pronouncer there.
how about that?
That is a radio professional at work.
That is indeed. And it specifically is a recording from the Village Vanguard in New York, which is very subterranean. In fact, it is 15 steps down to the Village Vanguard. 15 steps to heaven as opposed to 7.
I don't know that I've ever counted. Josh, you've hauled some equipment up and down those stairs.
That's why I know the number of steps all too well.
Well, this episode, we thought we would talk about the Vanguard and take this really wonderful recording by Miguel Zenón as an excuse, as a peg and a portal, if you will. It is, of course, just the latest in a long, long series of terrific recordings made in this room. And it seemed like a good time to talk about that, partly because, Josh, you are a part of that history.
I guess in some ways I am. In fact, very specifically related to Miguel Zenón and the quartet and performing at the Village Vanguard, because I produced a series for NPR Music for a number of years, npr.org/Village Vanguard. Some of them still remain, which includes a 2013 performance by this very same band performing at the Village Vanguard, which marked their debut at the club. Quite a few times I was able to get some insight into debut performances. In fact, I have one available that should be queued up. It's once where we welcomed J.D. Allen and his trio.
Oh, yeah. Well, why don't we hear a taste of that, and then I have some things to say about this legacy.
Oh, boy. We're live at the Village Vanguard on WBGO and NPR Music. I'm Josh Jackson. Be sure to join us. We do this once a month from the club, where we do live chats, a live video stream, and we archive the audio, and in many cases these days, they're also available as podcasts. So we hope that you'll do a little investigation for NPR Music and also at WBGO, the jazz source for 30 years. We'll be joining the audience in New York on WBGO in just a few moments with the J.D. Allen Trio featuring drummer Rudy Royston and bassist Greg August. It should be quite an interesting performance, the debut of saxophonist J.D. Allen at the Vanguard. Good evening, and welcome to the Village Vanguard. I'm Josh Jackson from WBGO. A nice performance in store for us from the J.D. Allen Trio. So that's interesting. You actually hear here at the club. An old version of Josh Jackson, of course. But
au contraire, that is a young version of Josh Jackson.
That's a much younger version of Josh Jackson. But it was curious because we were handling two audiences at the same time. So because we were video streaming these performances live. Mm-hmm. And so there were people who were already with us before we actually created the join for the first set
at the Village Vanguard. So
All right.
it was like the warm-up part with some audience and then a reset for Welcome to the Village Vanguard. At that point, I was live on NPR Music as well as WBGO in New York.
Yeah.
And the gentlemen are making their way to the stage right now. We're live.
So when did these broadcasts begin? And how difficult was it to make them happen?
Yeah, well, first I should say that there's been a history of great performances captured at the Village Vanguard, specifically from WBGO, which preceded the series that we did. In fact, I remember going into the basement and seeing some of the old reels of tape of things that had been recorded at the Vanguard. Some of those things you occasionally find in places like YouTube, of all places.
Yeah.
But so this was about working with Lorraine Gordon and the club. Lorraine, for some reason, she loved me dearly. And also she loved my boss, Thurston Briscoe. And so through that relationship, we decided to restart a monthly concert series at the Village Vanguard. And because of the hallowed ground that it is, NPR was certainly very interested. So we began the series in 2006, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
We had a performance where we captured the guitarist Adam Rogers as sort of a warm-up. I believe that was in April of that year. Then the following month, right around Miles's birthday, Al Foster's quartet was at the Vanguard. And then we basically recreated what we were going to do when we officially launched. And then we launched the following month with 2 back-to-back weeks of Brian Blade and the Fellowship Band and Guillermo Klein and Los Huachos.
All right.
Yeah.
So I do want to talk about this chapter.
Yeah.
Which I think for many people, myself included, was a really important thing that happened in New York. But let's step back for a moment, because you mentioned Lorraine. We, of course, have mentioned the Vanguard. But for anyone listening who has not already sort of sipped the Kool-Aid, I think we should say outright that you and I both believe, as many others do, that the Village Vanguard is the greatest jazz club on the planet.
It is.
And we need to introduce, I think, Lorraine as a character in this story. So the Village Vanguard, just reel off some facts here. The Village Vanguard was opened in 1935. It is basically 11th Street and 7th Avenue South.
178 7th Avenue South.
There you go. Iconic red awning that stretches over the pavement. 15 steps, as you said, down into the depths. A distinctive wedge-shaped room, and we'll get into why that is important in a minute.
Capacity of 123.
That's right. And yeah, you've seen the fire marshal sign that says what the legal capacity of the room is. The Vanguard was founded and opened by Max Gordon.
Yes.
And he ran the club for many, many years and defined its evolution from this kind of almost anything goes sort of cabaret room. Like it was comedians and folk singers and poetry readings and all kinds of stuff. And really pivots and becomes a full-time jazz club at a certain point. I'm trying to remember exactly the year, but basically in like the 40s, 50s, right?
Yeah.
Lorraine takes it over after Max's passing. And I'm holding in my hands her memoir, Alive at the Village Vanguard, My Life in and Out of Jazz Time, which is a really wonderful, wonderful book. It has some of the spirit of Lorraine herself, which was formidable.
She was a force.
She was a force. And many people knew her as a very intimidating presence. But I'd like to read a little bit from this because she establishes some of the location and the spirit of the place. So this is from chapter 15. I open up the Vanguard front door at 3 p.m. almost every afternoon. The building itself, the whole structure, is 2 stories tall with us in the basement. The Vanguard has a sewer running directly beneath it and all the problems inherent in occupying a basement. Every time it rains, we run around with towels trying to cover the leaks. My landlord has caulked most of these, but he still calls whenever it rains to ask, "Is everything okay?" The building has been around only 75 years. Now she's writing, let's see. You can do the math. Don't make me do the math. Well, anyway, when she was writing, it was 75 years only.
Yeah.
She says, back in 1921, after the city plowed a subway link through Greenwich Village that sliced many building lots into odd shapes, a developer named Morris Weinstein threw up our triangular building, renting space in it to, among others, a cleaners on street level and a speakeasy in the basement appropriately dubbed the Golden Triangle. So I'll stop there, but that establishes a little bit of the weird building history. And the idiosyncrasies of this space, which purely by accident turn it into this temple of sound.
Yeah, it's an acoustic anomaly in some ways in New York. I mean, aside from the vibration of the subways running below it, it's almost like being in a womb. It's so quiet. But all of it has a certain lore. I mean, and all of it actually, because the banquettes are there, I mean, everything sort of contributes to the sound,
And with this triangular shape, the bandstand is at the narrowest point in the triangle.
Right.
And there is not a bad sonic vantage point in this room. I mean, I've spent many nights at the very back of the room by the bar. I've basically sat, in every possible spot in this room.
Yeah. And
I'm sure you have too. And the sound is always great. Sight lines, that's another story. But it's really striking how, the sound of the room, which has been documented on hundreds of recordings, the first of which was, one of the greatest, Sonny Rollins, A Night at the Village Vanguard, 1957. All of these recordings share at least one thing, which is just the sonic signature of the room. It's dry, but vibrant. It's astonishingly clear. I'm sure there are some more, audiophile terms that I'm.
No, I think you
I'm
capture it.
here.
I mean, and the important thing when you go into a place and record like that is, to me, to capture the sound of that room. And I credit David Talixon, who did it for this series that we did, because in addition to capturing from left and right off the stage, he would hang stereo microphones in the ceiling, like midway through the club.
Yeah.
So that it captured the essence of, you could even hear it to some degree behind me in that introduction.
Yeah.
You don't get to hear the old cash register anymore. But you still can occasionally hear the ice machine and everything else.
Somebody with a cocktail shaker making a martini.
Absolutely.
The room has a character.
Oh, yes.
It is a character.
And it's full of characters.
Right.
Absolutely full of characters from the musicians as well as the patrons.
You mentioned David Talixon. Shout out to David Talixon.
Yes.
The original sonic engineer in this room was Rudy Van Gelder.
Right.
And he was the person who set up his portable machine at a table near the stage to capture Sonny Rollins. He did the same on many subsequent occasions. So, the Sonny album is the first. Soon after, 1961, we get Bill Evans, Sunday at the Village Vanguard. That's an afternoon set. And then, from that point on, really, we're off to the races. And I think maybe this is a good moment to share, one personal favorite, one piece of audio that comes from right around this period. So this was not a commercial lauded release, but it's something that comes to us through Mosaic Records. I first heard it as part of a box set, the complete Jerry Mulligan concert jazz band recordings. This was recorded in December of 1960, and it is the Jerry Mulligan Concert Band. basically a precursor to the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Band, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Sure.
But what I wanted to do here is drop the needle on a moment that, to me, captures the spirit of the Vanguard. And it's a series of exchanges between Jerry Mulligan on baritone saxophone and Clark Terry on trumpet. And they're trading fours over a tune titled Blueport. What is your response to that piece of music, Josh?
It was full of such great humor. I mean, they cycled through so many amazing tunes when they were trading,
And you can hear some laughs on the bandstand at
for sure.
a couple of those.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a good feeling.
This was not, this is not among the celebrated Live at the Vanguard recordings necessarily. And I think it's probably not as impeccably engineered as some of those other recordings, but you still hear the room.
Yeah.
Like I feel like you can tell, you know where they are. And this is a thing that, I've taught some jazz history classes and sent students to the Vanguard for the first time. And one thing that I've told them was, if you really pay attention when you're in this room, and as you're listening, kind of look around and just kind of imprint the dimensions of this room, maybe it'll take more than one time, but at a certain point, you will internalize that and you'll be able to hear any recording made in this room and put yourself in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
And so that's one example where I feel like, because we have the relationship with the space, that recording, 1960 is before either of us was born.
Yeah.
But I feel like we can live that moment because we have the recording and we have the knowledge of the space to sort of plant ourselves, a couple of tables back.
The other dirty little secret, Nate, as you know, is nobody goes to the Vanguard to play badly.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
People give it the respect that it deserves. And that was the one thing I loved about doing the series for broadcast as well, is I just knew 9 times out of 10 we were going to get really great performance and occasionally strike gold.
Yeah. Well, here's where I should mention that I think probably this was the circumstances under which you and I met, right?
I think so.
Because the years that you were broadcasting live from the Vanguard were also the years that I was writing about jazz for the New York Times. And on a number of occasions, I reviewed a gig that you broadcasted. And I just looked this up to see if I could find a few examples. There were many, I think.
Oh, wow.
And there were also examples of gigs that I just went to and my colleague, Ben Ratliff, reviewed that you broadcast.
Yeah.
So, put us together. And I think probably almost every one of the sets that you broadcast were covered by either me or Ben. But a few examples. Greg Osby in 2010.
Yeah.
With Nir Felder in the band.
That's right.
Mark Rebo's debut in 2012 with Henry Grimes and Chad Taylor.
God, I loved it.
Jimmy Cobb in 2013.
Cobb's Mob. Yeah.
So those are just a few. There are others. And I know that there was a Craig Taborn trio that Ben reviewed that you broadcast, and I was there for that. So there's just so many. I feel like, you and I were circling each other for years.
Oh, for sure.
Sort of doing the same work from different angles.
Absolutely.
But the Vanguard was this meeting ground for us.
Yeah, it's the meeting ground for anyone who really wants to have a real deep experience with the music. And I think Lorraine always treated it as such. The staff always made sure of it. It's not a place where everybody whips out their phones and is influencing
No.
things.
And
know.
even, Lorraine is no longer with us, but the club still observes these house rules.
Yeah. Sit down and listen.
Right. Be present.
And have a drink if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned this is, a room where people bring their A game. Partly it's because, at least back in the day, you were likely to be reviewed by the New York Times or some other publication.
Yeah.
It is a discerning audience. The people who go to the club are there to be there. But I have a question for you about recording in the room. I've spoken to a lot of musicians who've recorded in the Vanguard, but I haven't gotten so deep into the logistics and the particularities of capturing sound in that room. And so you've done that. What are the biggest challenges to getting that sound faithfully while staying out of the way of the audience that's in the room?
I mean, the challenge is just what I think anybody who's capturing audio's challenge is, which is to get sort of the clarity and the representation of what you hear. And, we go in to these broadcasts every Tuesday and set up, because that was the first day that typically musicians are starting their week after the Monday performance with the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
So we go in on Tuesday, and very frequently the entire time we're setting up, cabling up, mics, etc., we are in the room while the band is rehearsing or something is being played all the time. And that's your reference point, because fundamentally what you're trying to do is you're trying to place a listener in that room
Mm-hmm.
and hearing what you hear faithfully. And great sets of ears and engineers know how to capture that stuff without overdoing it sometimes.
Right.
Tendency is for people to want to overdo certain things.
When you say people, you're talking artists, engineers, both?
Some engineers, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how would you overdo it? Like, what would that mean?
People who want to put too much reverb in a space,
Mm-hmm.
you have so many toys at your disposal that, sometimes engineers have a tendency to rely on the toys as opposed to their ears and their history and their knowledge.
Mm.
And I always trusted David Tallickson. Great set of ears.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, the series wouldn't have been possible without him, because, it ate 2 days out of our week, and we had families and everything else. And we just understood how important it was.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'll never forget one day I was driving. I don't know why I was driving in New York, because I didn't have a car. I must have been coming in from a road trip or something. But
Yeah.
I was in Brooklyn, behind the wheel, and flipping the dial, and I just landed upon Christian McBride live from the Vanguard.
with Inside Straight.
It was the band with Warren Wolf. Yeah, right.
Mhm.
And they were just blazing, and it was, it's so exciting, especially in this era, right? Like now we live in sort of a live stream era. Live radio is a very specific thing and really precious and
Yeah.
really hard to do right.
Yes, it is.
And to just be aware that this was happening right now, just across town. It was very cool. That sounds so obvious, but it was very, I think, to the entire listening community, it was like a very special thing.
I pinch myself all the time because, here I was in the club that I had listened to all these records, and I was making something happen. And I felt like I was getting away with absolute murder too. I'm serious. I mean, it wasn't easy. I mean, in terms of it being radio,
Mm-hmm.
it was an open, and it was the band, and then it was a close and credits.
Yeah.
It was the best way that I could represent the Vanguard.
Mm-hmm.
Is here's a thing, let's all pay attention and listen, and that's what you just heard.
Right. Right.
But like an hour and 15 minutes of live concert, unless you're there from the very beginning, you're just like, what the hell am I listening to? And maybe you got in the middle of that anyway and said, what the hell am I listening to? And you just kept listening,
Well, this is the beauty of it, is trust the artists and trust the audience.
Yeah.
What is the first live at the Vanguard recording that you remember hearing and like really thinking about the room and thinking about that alchemy of the music and the space?
Probably Sunday at the Village Vanguard and Waltz for Debbie.
Yeah.
Just because it was so sonically present in terms of how that trio played. They weren't really loud. And so you could really get a sense of what that room sounded like in all of those spaces that Bill and Paul and LaFaro, to a lesser degree, left.
Yeah.
And that was when I heard the room the best. Then I heard Coltrane.
Right.
I bought all of those Japanese.
We just talked about this. Yeah.
I mean, I bought them because when the Japanese issued them by the date of the performances in November.
Mm-hmm. And we should mention, the reason we were talking about it is that Impulse has announced that later this year, this fall, they are releasing first ever U.S. sanctioned vinyl edition of the complete 1961 Village Vanguard recording. So this is Coltrane's quartet with Eric Dolphy and, various editions like Reggie Workman. Who's on oud on the...
Mohamed Abdul Malik.
Yeah. So, but just a landmark set of recordings.
And it all came out in other various instances too. There was a track, Chasing Another Train from the Newport recording. That was a Vanguard recording.
Yeah, I would say that for me, it was a combination. It was Sonny, Bill Evans, and that Coltrane. Those were the three that were my biggest gateway, to the room. Yeah. But, you mentioned Bill Evans and that trio. There's a famous photograph of Bill Evans and Paul Motian and Scott LaFaro sitting along the stairwell in the back near the men's room. But it raises the point that for me, I think, and I'd have to really think about this to be sure, but I think that Paul Motian was the musician that I saw more times than anyone else in that room. And some of that a lot of it has to do with the fact that Paul at a certain point stopped touring.
That's the only place he would play.
he said, yeah. I'm not going to Europe anymore. I'm not going to Japan anymore. This is it. Yeah. Manhattan. He wouldn't even go to Brooklyn.
Right.
And so the Vanguard, there were 2 or 3 weeks out of the year when, you knew that there would be a Paul Motian led band. And then he might play a few other weeks with other bands as a...
Well, and he consistently appears throughout the Vanguard's history. Mm-hmm. So in the 60s with the Bill Evans Trio, he's part of the American Quartet that's on Fort Yawa. That's a live recording at the Village Vanguard.
Keith Jarrett's band.
Keith Jarrett's group. In the 80s, I believe it's the 80s when Sound of Love came out with Bill Frisell and Joe Lovano, which was a dynamic trio. I mean, so just every single decade, there's Paul.
Yeah. And, you'd sometimes go to see something else, and Paul would be sitting at Lorraine's table just hanging out, you know. He was effectively in residence always in the club. It was a very special thing. And I know that none of us took it for granted,
Oh, absolutely not. I had so many great conversations with him. He was a trip.
Yeah. I think we should hear our next piece of music. You brought something in.
Yeah, let's do something from the 80s.
Yeah.
Then this is a performance from 1986, I believe. 2 records were made out of this. It's the Mal Waldron Quintet. And so the Mal Waldron Quintet at the time was Reggie Workman on bass. It was Ed Blackwell, who I always loved with Mal. And the horns were Woody Shaw and Charlie Rouse. just a couple of years before Charlie passed. 2 recordings were made. The first was called The Get-Go. Both of these were on Soul Note. The second was called The Seagulls of Kristiansund. And we're going to play Mal Waldron's composition Snake Out from that. I mean, there's some periods where Woody Shaw is just absolutely reaching.
Yeah.
You know, and even Charlie stretches, you know, like a lot of people don't recognize Charlie Rouse as that kind of player, but it was just something about this band that was just, and the trio itself, I could listen to those guys.
Yeah.
They did make a couple of records in Japan with Reggie and Ed Blackwell.
Well, if you are a regular Late Set listener, you heard us talking about Mal Waldron with Ed Blackwell in the Ben Radcliffe episode.
That's right. That's right.
He talks about that Blackwell quality of sort of dancing.
Yeah.
And you definitely hear it on this track. Man. And then 1986,
1986.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like, the Marsalis era.
That's right.
And like, this is, it's interesting. Partly it's the Blackwell of it all, but this reminds me that my very first time at the Vanguard, I drove up. Did I take the train? I don't know. Doesn't matter. But I came up from Philly.
Yeah. I
was still in college and made a pilgrimage to see the Joe Lovano, Tom Harrell quartet.
Oh, yeah.
And one of their tunes is Blackwell's Message.
It sure is.
But that vibe, like that spirit, and I feel like this Mal Waldron band kind of has the spirit of that Lovano band, with Billy Hart. Open, like very sharp, but very open. And the spirit moving all the time.
I remember Jeff Tane Watts, at one point, I was talking to him, and he was telling me he was hitting out a rhythm, and then he said, yeah, Ed Blackwell wrote this out on a napkin for me at the Vanguard. I was like, all right.
I hope he's got that framed somewhere.
Yeah, for real.
So why did you pick this particular recording, aside from its, excellence?
I mean, to me, it's a somewhat unusual frontline combo, but really strong, and I just love the band. I mean, the 2 records. I mean, at one point there's a record that the trio made in Japan where they're doing like covers of Beat It and stuff, But there's another one called You and the Night and the Music that's an absolute killer of a trio record.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something about Reggie Workman maybe being sort of extra beyond the Richard Davis, Ed Blackwell, Mal Waldron kind of triangle, so it was good to hear that. And to me, I've never really heard anything where Blackwell wasn't great.
Yeah.
Honestly.
So I just mentioned my first visit to the club. What was yours?
I don't think that I went to the club until I worked there. So, which probably would have been Terrence Blanchard's Let's Get Lost, the McHugh, Dorothy Fields thing that he did for Sony Classical. At one point, he did a week at the Vanguard and with Cassandra there. I think that was it, but I don't know, man. I mean, we did so many things where we didn't have just a flight pack where we didn't hoof everything down the stairs. We actually had, at the time, Aurasonic Limited, which was a remote recording truck, basically, that we park outside and we'd run the cabling through the awning and down into the club.
I remember seeing that truck.
Yeah. So, that was for a Vanguard gig. I don't, when you've done probably close to 70 recordings there.
Mm-hmm.
I start to forget them. And
Yeah.
also I'm getting older now too, so I should be forgetting stuff.
When I say to you, like, what is a Vanguard set that you feel incredibly privileged to have witnessed? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Incredibly privileged to witness.
Something sort of rare and special.
That I worked on, or
No,
just something
we're in the room for.
I can't remember who it was, but I think it was a friend of my wife was in town in New York. And, they were asking like, well, what would you like to do? And yada, yada, yada. And, they sort of slightly feigned some interest in jazz. I said, well, like I could probably, set up a really nice evening if you're really interested. And that was a night that we went to see Uri Kane's trio.
Mm.
It was one of the times where I wish we had pressed record on this one,
So was this Drew Gress
And Ben.
Okay,
Yeah.
Ben Porowski.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a phenomenal set of music. It was a phenomenal set of music. And I remember thinking, I can't remember who my wife's friend was, but they were totally blown away.
Mm-hmm.
And so was I.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, wow. I wish that had been captured.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, one of them would be Bebo Valdez.
Mm.
And, it's pretty obvious why that was rare and special.
Yeah.
Every time I saw Chucho in the club, it was a special event. But
Sure.
then to see Bebo.
Right.
And also to see Lorraine Gordon, like, levitating.
She had a thing for Cuban pianists,
she
man.
She really did.
It was actually how I snuck Fabian Almazan into the Village Vanguard.
Yeah.
Was, I recommended, I said, yeah, he's played with Terrence here at the club, and he's a Cuban pianist, and that was the end of that.
Right.
Yeah.
When I guess it was in 2005, when the club was celebrating its, what would that have been, the 70th anniversary?
Yeah.
I reviewed an entire week's worth of special programming for the Village Voice. And so I saw a couple of things that week that were very cool, including Wynton Marsalis brought his band to the club just for one night.
Yeah.
And in the 90s, I had listened to, the box set of Wynton at the Vanguard. And, that was a club that he no longer was playing regularly. So it was cool to hear that band in that room. The Heath Brothers played that week as well. Bobby Hutcherson played that week.
Wow.
And the Bad Plus. And I was there also the very first time the Bad Plus played the club. And, Lorraine just fell in love with Ethan Iverson, and they became a fixture there. And it was, for a while, it was a real event. When the Bad Plus played the Vanguard, it was a happening.
One of the truck recording gigs at the Vanguard that we did was for NPR on New Year's Eve. So we did New Year's Eve twice.
Mm-hmm.
We did the Bad Plus once, but before that we did Michael White, the original Liberty Jazz Band.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that because it was us with the NPR crew together. And shortly after we rang in the new year, the phone in the office starts ringing, and Lorraine picked it up, and she's like, hello? You want tickets? So you had to call the club,
Right.
to make reservations. She said, do you want tickets? She said, call back next year. And then she hung up the phone. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
That's Lorraine Gordon.
That's Lorraine Gordon. But if you called the club, she was the one who would pick up.
Oh, yes.
That was the thing.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
yes.
my God.
Yeah, no, it is still a very special place.
It is.
Yeah.
And shout out to Deborah Gordon,
For real.
Lorraine's daughter, who has done just a fabulous job of carrying that spirit forward, and to Jed Eisenman.
Jed.
I mean, you look at the programming, and it has evolved. It has kept up. Maybe this is a good segue to the next piece of music that you brought.
Jerry Allen Trio. So I decided to bring this in because, as I mentioned before, the broadcasts were typically on Wednesday nights. So for everything that we did at the Village Vanguard, we captured 3 sets of music because we came in on Tuesdays to record one set. We always had it as a potential backup in case something were to go wrong for the live broadcast, which was the first set on Wednesdays. And then afterwards, we'd stay and record the second set as well. So because we captured these first sets every Tuesday, we always got sort of an introduction into how an artist sort of sets the table for the week, you know? And when we did Jerry with the trio, with Tane, in fact, Jeff Watts on drums, Kenny Davis on bass, it was right around the time of Motor City Moments and the stuff, the Detroit stuff. But she opened up the Tuesday with one of my favorite of her songs, which is Drummer's Song.
Good evening, and thank you so much for being out here and braving this weather to join us. We really appreciate that. We have on bass, Kenny Davis. And on drums, Jeff Tane Watts. And we're going to open up with something called a drummer's song.
All right, Josh, you're going to have to share this recording with me through separate channels.
I have a number of recordings that have never heard the light of day.
Even just to hear her addressing the crowd kind of gave me chills.
Yeah.
To hear her voice in that room. Wow.
Yeah.
So
we didn't even get to the actual part of the song that anyone would recognize.
Yeah, right. This is all preamble.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you chose this. I didn't know you were bringing this. But we mentioned circling each other. This is one of those gigs that I reviewed for the Times. So I'm calling up my review, and this might be interesting to hear. So I opened this review by saying, if every great jazz pianist needs a Live at the Village Vanguard album made with a fine trio, the time is ripe for Jerry Allen. And then I mentioned that she did make one with Charlie Hayden and Paul Motion, but it was out of print.
True. And
I said, and it was 20 years ago. So now I'll quote myself. Or maybe I should have you read it.
Is that solipsism?
Here, start with this, she's working, and then go to the end of this paragraph.
All right. She's working at the Village Vanguard this week with the bassist Kenny Davis and the drummer Jeff Tane Watts. And if there are plans to record the engagement, besides the Wednesday night broadcast and an online video stream coordinated by NPR and WBGO-FM, 88.3 in the New York region, she hasn't said anything about them, which means you should hedge your bets and head to the club, where she'll be through Sunday. What she's doing there constitutes a vital update. Her brand of pianism, assertive and soulful, has long suggested a golden mean of major post-war styles. She just as easily deploys the slipstream whimsy of Herbie Hancock, the earthy sweep of McCoy Tyner, and the swarming agitation of Cecil Taylor. Parentheticals. Last year, Miss Allen released a solo piano album, Flying Toward the Sound, on the Motema label, naming those three figures as inspiration. Close parentheticals. She also seems to have absorbed useful information from Randy Weston and Kenny Barron, but what you hear in her playing isn't a jumble of influences. She has her own point of view, and she's clearer about it now than ever.
My words sound so much better coming out of your mouth.
I'm going to read your audiobooks now.
There you go.
Yeah.
So it's funny. I've been thinking a lot about the disappearance of review coverage. You know, you could also say the disappearance of live broadcasts from the Vanguard. It's
Absolutely.
I feel like we're talking about a vanquished world. But I'm so grateful that we have this record,
Yeah.
And I do remember, that engagement and I remember feeling a sense of urgency about sort of getting the word out,
Yeah. That was the set that you reviewed. And so I thought, boy, look at her just setting the table for the listener.
Sort of challenging and welcoming in equal measure.
Yeah.
And yes, she is another truly great musician that I feel very fortunate to have heard a number of times in that room, leading her own bands and also playing in others.
Yeah.
There's a thing that I think any great musician, and basically anyone who headlines the Vanguard, is a great musician.
Yes.
But they all have this understanding, they carry it with them into the room, that you are in dialogue with the spirits at the Vanguard. And, it's very helpful, of course, that many of them are on the walls. If you're sitting at the piano, like, you just look over your left shoulder and you see Tommy Flanagan, pictures of Bill Evans and Coltrane and Monk and, so many.
Dexter.
Yeah. And, we've all spent time with the recordings. So you can't really take that bandstand without sort of an awareness of that lineage. And we've probably both seen first sets by sort of young up-and-coming artists where it takes them a little while to like settle into the room because the weight of that can be really intimidating.
Yeah. I wish I had recorded what ultimately became a Rift in Decorum. Ambrose Akinmusiri's recording from the Village Vanguard. I think that's 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So I had been finished with the series by that point. But I may have even texted him to let him know, well, I'm glad you finally got into the Vanguard, because he was one that I had always hoped to get in there and do the series.
Yeah.
And
well, thankfully, tape did roll.
Tape did roll, and I love that record.
Yeah.
I mean, it presents that whole band in different ways. It's like sometimes the focus is on Sam, the pianist. There's a particular track that I brought here from that performance. It's just so beautiful. And it starts out with Sam and Harish on bass, and it's called A Diver Song.
Yeah.
Yeah, this thing floats like you're underwater.
Yeah.
I mean, which to me, I think sometimes the real quiet and sensitive moments in the Vanguard, they feel even more special sometimes, just because the rest of New York is so damn loud. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Well, and this recording and Ambrose's band are so beautifully indicative of what happens when you can capture the full range, you know? Like they can go from like the most whispery, delicate, like spider webby kind of stuff to just like knocking you back in your chair.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel calculated or pretentious. It's like, it is the full expression of what this band is.
Yeah.
So this is I'm glad that we are sort of coming around to, the last decade or so of material at the Vanguard, because I wanted to make the point that for all of the history that we, obsess over with this room and this recorded legacy, going back to 1957, it is a living temple, right? And it continues to keep up with what this music sounds like. For many, many years, there were fixed points on the calendar. You knew that Cedar Walton would be there around Christmas time.
That's right.
You knew that there would be a couple weeks in November when the Paul Motion, Joe Lovano, Bill Frisell band would be there.
That's right. Charlap's Trio.
Bill Charlap's Trio. So there were certain sort of signposts.
Yeah.
And as we have lost some of these musicians and, there have been spots that have needed to be filled. But the club has made that into an opportunity, giving new voices and new band leaders an opportunity. So this year we have a Vanguard debut from Marcus Gilmore, someone who played the club dozens of times before he was asked to bring his own band in. And, this is a great document of what he's about as a composer and band leader. Hopefully there'll be plenty more along those lines. But really interesting that, he decides that his first full-length release as an artist will be a live at the Vanguard record.
Yeah.
And that's just one of many examples. I thought maybe the last piece of music that we hear in this episode should be another example of a really sort of boundary-pushing contemporary artist. And this is the pianist and composer Chris Davis. She released one of the, consensus albums of the year, Diatom Ribbons. I think that was 2019. And then she brought the band to the Vanguard for an album release show. And that gig was recorded 2022. There was a COVID delay there. But in 2022, she brought a version of this band into the club with Terry Lynn Carrington on drums and Val Gentil on turntables, Julian Lage on guitar, and Trevor Dunn on electric and acoustic bass. And so let's hear some of a composition called Brain Feel, and then we'll talk about that and sort of what this represents. We've been talking about recording itself, and I feel compelled to note that the engineer on this recording is Ron St. Germain. I think he did a really spectacular job of capturing the room sound. There's something about Terry Lynn's cymbals that I just the way that they express on this recording, like I feel like I can hear the room just in the, you know, the resonance of the cymbal, you know, the articulation and the decay.
Yeah. You know, when we did the series at the Village Vanguard, we tried a couple of different ways of recording, including at one point doing it Rudy Van Gelder style, where we put our technical assistant with our mic pre's near the stage, like right by the drummer. And I just remember that after we did that, he came up to me and he said, "Thank you. Thanks for letting me be a part of this."
Yeah.
Because he really got to experience being right there by the drums. I forget who it was for, but, you know, there's never not a great drummer playing.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring in this recording because I think it's indicative of that point I made about the Vanguard really completely keeping up with the discourse and with the evolution of the music.
Yeah, you and I saw Chris later recently with Jonathan Blake and Bob.
Yeah, Bob Hurst.
Yeah.
One of the best gigs I've seen this year. Certainly, that was this year, right?
Was it? I don't
Or was
know.
it last year?
Yeah, it's just like
I'm starting to experience what you're.
it's all in the slurry, man.
It's a slurry.
Yeah,
What a slurry, though.
slurry with a fringe on top.
But you know, there is something that Chris Davis represents that is, you know, it is definitely within the continuum, certainly, but it is very distinctly of our moment. You know.
Yeah.
She has her own set of influences, which include a lot of 20th and 21st century classical music. And so it's this small group jazz language, but it is this, you know, it could not be made at any other time
Right.
in the music's history, you know.
So much great music is created there. I mean, Wynton Marsalis made a great record from the Village Vanguard. I mean, there's just more traditional sounds as well, you know, more forward for what that's worth. I hate using these terms, honestly, but, you know, different sounds. Lots of different sounds happen at the Village Vanguard.
Well, here's a irresponsible statement. I feel like if somebody wanted to assemble a sort of representative jazz library that was delimited by some kind of algorithmic restriction, you could do a lot worse than to say everything recorded at the Village Vanguard.
For real.
Just think about this year, right? So this year we have, you know, as we've mentioned, Miguel Zenón.
Yep.
We have Marcus Gilmore. We also have Bill Charlap.
That's right.
I'm probably leaving out a couple of other worthy contenders. But, you know, just in those three recordings, you have three very different sensibilities, but they're all speaking the language. And so you think about all of the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra recordings, all of the Thad Jones, Mel Lewis recordings, Albert Eiler.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it really, and then if you include by, you know, when I say everything recorded there, like, let's include all of your broadcasts, you know? But I mean, think about it. If someone only had recordings made at the Vanguard as the foundation of their jazz library, they'd do all right.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you'd be pretty hip, actually.
Well, any closing thoughts as we've you know, round the corner on this love letter to a room and a body of work?
Closing thoughts? No, I just thought maybe we'd play just one more piece of music on the way out, and that is the trio that we had talked about with Paul Motion and Bill Frisell and Lovano.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's no better way to go out.
From Sound of Love, might as well play Duke Ellington's Sound of Love, because that's what the Vanguard represents. People coming together in a space around the sound of love. And we didn't even get into Mingus at the Village Vanguard, for God's sakes.
Oh,
that's
so
a whole
many.
story in and of itself.
So many stories.
Yeah, I know.
Well, we will forego this I Dig this week because this whole episode has been about digging.
Digging the Vanguard.
We want to send out love and appreciation to the entire Vanguard family, the aforementioned Deborah and Jed and everyone else at the club. Those who have been associated with the club in any incarnation, and people that, Josh, you used to work with. Shout out to Dave Talixon again.
Yes, indeed. And Josh Webb and so many people who worked with us on those broadcasts. Patrick Jaron Watson-Anon, where are you at?
Patrick.
The Late Set is a production of WRTI and made possible by WRTI members. You can become one yourself at WRTI.org. It's hosted by me, Josh Jackson, as well as Nate Chinen, and the show is produced by Alex Arif.
Robbie Webb is our assistant production manager. Our operations and production manager is Tyler McClure. Associate General Manager for Content and Programming is Josh Jackson, and Bill Johnson is WRTI's General Manager. Stop by WRTI.org to see everything else we've got cooking up here in Philadelphia and beyond. We'll see you soon, maybe at the Vanguard.